Hi, I'm Tom Copel, one of the product managers here at Aquatic. Today we're going to have another installment of our webinar series, and today we're going to deal with tips and tricks of doing basic installations. So Lasco or Aquatic has been in business for quite a few years, and over that time we've learned a few tricks here and there, and we'd like to pass them on to you. So let's get started. Alright, first things first. It's always a good idea, even before you get to this stage of ripping things out or framing it in, to make yourself a checklist. What are your concerns when you're looking at this? What size requirements do you have? What's your price point? Are you replacing or doing a total remodel? And then also be honest with yourself. What are your physical needs now and in the future? You want to consider those when you're buying a new product. So have a checklist when you're doing your research online or through trade papers. But once you've decided, make sure you get the installation instructions and any tech data even prior to the delivery of your unit. So let's take a good look at this, and then we'll get started on the installation instructions and in the framing concerns. Okay, just another disclaimer before we get started. We're in a mocked up environment here, so for you realists out there, I apologize, but hopefully you'll get our meaning of what we're trying to get across here. Now the first unit I'm going to be installing actually has a 30-inch depth. So our first tip is don't be afraid to add a stud. You'll notice what we did here is actually turned one on its side. That gives us a little bit of play in our measurements, as well as gives us a nice nailing surface. Now within new construction, there's usually not an issue with moving a unit into place. But in a remodel application, you literally, potentially, only have a 5-foot distance in here to move your unit around. Now we've already placed our unit, but the critical dimension really isn't the 60 inches across the threshold or the skirt, it's actually the diagonal from opposing corners. And on this particular one, I have 67 inches. 60, 67. You see our dilemma. I don't have a turning radius to be able to turn this. So I'm going to show you an easier way to drop this unit in. So moving your unit into position in a standing position is actually going to work out a little bit better. You also want to consider stripping the drywall back in a remodel application further than what you would think necessary. So give yourself an additional stud further than the distance of your unit. Now what we're going to do is we're going to use this pocket in between the studs to allow our flange to drop into place. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. So having this pathway here allowed me some open space to be able to get this corner and swing into the open gap and then allow it to drop into place. So now we're set and I can slide it back into the alcove. Okay, we talked a little bit earlier about the necessity of adding a stud or turning it. But don't be afraid to bring out the big boy toys when you need that extra bit of room to move your unit into place. Now take consideration though that you're not cutting loose a bearing wall or something that's holding a lot of weight to it. But removing one stud shouldn't cause you a problem. Now don't cut into the sill plate, which is this bottom piece right here. Instead, cut through the nails holding the stud at the bottom here. Then you can swing it out of the way to give yourself that extra turning radius. Alright, let's talk about foundation materials. Now at Aquatic, we highly recommend that you use it across any of our product lines. And in fact, on a few of our products, it's mandatory. Now, there's some old school remedies and new school remedies. Let's talk about a few. Now, some people on job sites, since it's easy to have access to, like to use joint compound. Not a good idea. Won't stand up under the pressures underneath the unit. So don't use that. Worst case. Next, old school, sand. The reason you don't want to use sand is it deflects and won't rebound. So don't use sand, not a good idea. Next thing you can use is thin set or mortar mix. This is a good product, easy to find, inexpensive. Bonds may be a little bit too well, a little bit harder to break up if you have to remove a unit or reset a unit, but still not a bad choice. Really, the best choice you could make is probably plaster of Paris. You can find this in any paint area of any local hardware store, and inexpensive to use. Now, the last one, which I'd recommend to a DIY person maybe, is a modified grout that has no shrink or low shrink factor. This is good to use just because you're not going to pull away from the unit once you set it in place. A little bit more expensive, so if cost is a benefit or you're running a large job, casting plaster is another. Now once you've decided on what foundation material you want to use, go ahead and mix that up into a doughy consistency to use it. Now what you're going to want to do on any center type drain application is create either a donut around your drain or 4 mounds to give you proper support. Now on any right or left type configuration, you're going to want to create a backbone to help support that. Now typically towards the lumbar area or back area of the unit, you're going to have quite a bit of a gap. So to help on that, so you're not using up a lot of foundation material, just grab some scrap wood and build it up just short of what you need, make sure you're securing that to the subfloor. If you have a concrete floor, you may want to consider shooting silicone or construction adhesive down to help give that a good bond and also eliminate squeaks. Now by covering that up, you're not using as much foundation material, and this is scrap anyway. Find it and use it. Now when it comes to fastening your unit to the studs, you've got a couple choices. What we've got here is a modified thrust self-tapping screw, or for those that are good with a hammer, you've got your galvanized roofing nails. Whatever your choice, you should choose a galvanized, a stainless, or something that's zinc coated or used in a moist environment. So also try to find something that has a low head height on it, so you're not going to interfere with your wall boards. Another thing to consider is once you've fastened your unit to the studs, cover each of those fasteners with a silicone or caulk to help on any moisture that might penetrate through. It's rare on any job site to find an alcove that's square and plumb. So a useful tool are shims. Now what this can help do is for any gapping that you might have between the unit and your fastener, you can use a shim to help make up that gap. So you're going to want to screw through the unit, through the shim, into the stud. Then you're going to want to score it and snap it off. So let's go ahead and do that now. Go ahead and score the shim and just snap it off. Okay, we've just shown you an issue where we had to compensate the gap between our unit and the stud by using a shim. Now, that's great for giving us a good fastening point here on the unit, but what about the rest of the wall? Well, to help compensate that gap all the way up, you can use what's called a furring strip. Now a furring strip can be bought in inexpensive cardboard strips or a little more expensive wood strip, and they come in various thicknesses. Now you can double or triple these up depending on what type of gap you need to compensate for. So these are also a great use to give you a good, nice finished wall. During your ordering process, hopefully you considered any requirements you might have of grab bars or seats. But if you're like me and waited till the last minute, you may now be thinking about consideration for the future and installation of grab bars. Well, don't fear. If you've already got your unit and now you know you're going to want to put grab bars in the future, you still can take some plywood or OSB and a good construction adhesive will bond that to the unit. Just make sure you keep a reference point of where you installed these. Now, an alternative to bonding the material directly to the unit is bonding it or screwing it or nailing it to the framing itself. Now, the only problem with this is you want to make sure that the thickness of your material that you're placing here matches your gap on your unit. So we'll check that out, make sure we have a proper measurement, and then we're going to want to add construction adhesive to that as well to get a good bond between the unit and the backing. Now, in a remodel application, you're not going to have access to the backside like we do here, so you're going to want to add your backing to the front side here prior to sliding the unit in. But if you are opened up and you have access, take what your measurement is between your unit and your finished stud here and see if you can either slide a board in between or go ahead and finish off a stud against this way and just push it in until you're touching the unit. You're going to want an adhesive right here to make sure it bonds to the unit, but then you can go ahead and nail it off, get a good rigid wall that way. Now, your only consideration when doing this, make sure you're not interfering with any plumbing. Now, the unit we've installed here has a seat on it, so I want to make sure that future there's no issues with possible deflection on this seat. So I've gone ahead and added a brace to that as well.